Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime. A quick note before we begin. What you're about to hear is an update to an episode I released back in April of 2018 that was simply titled The Toronto Van Attack. If you haven't listened to that episode and you don't know the story, I suggest you listen to part 1 first. I've added a link to part 1 in the episode notes, and I've reorganized the Nighttime episode archive to place this series in sequence. Now with that said, let's get to it. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, our topic will be the Toronto Van Attack of 2018 and the subsequent confession of Alek Minassian.
You are tuned to the Nighttime podcast, focused on the fringe of Canada.
I'm going to update you on the investigation aspect of homicides 18 to 27 for this year. It is alleged that during the morning hours, as the chief mentioned, of Monday, April 23rd, the accused, now known to be 25-year-old Alek Minassian, attended a Ryder truck rental facility. He then proceeded to rent a panel-style van. Subsequent to that, he then made his way to the area of Finch and Younge Street in Toronto, and this was around 1:30 p.m. The accused is alleged to have posted a cryptic message on Facebook minutes before he began driving the rented van, and he drove it southbound on Younge Street and onto the crowded sidewalks. He continued to drive southbound on Younge Street, deliberately striking pedestrians on the sidewalk and roadway with the vehicle. The accused was arrested by a member of the Toronto Police Service in the area of Yonge and Shepherd Avenue. Once arrested, the accused was taken to 32 Division and he was investigated by the Homicide Squad. He has been charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, 13 counts of attempted murder, and we're anticipating a 14th count of attempted murder, which will be laid shortly following some follow-up investigation. And because the accused has been charged, I'm restricted from discussing any evidence involved in the investigation, including any questions pertaining to motive.
So Scott, it's been a little over a year since we last did the episode talking about the Toronto van attack. Since you're living right there and you know you walk by the scene of this crime all the time, like what's been happening? What's the mood like in Toronto? Is this still something that's talked about often?
Well, it's not so much often because people just, to be honest, they move on from things in this city, and but there was a memorial on the 1-year anniversary where the van attack originated. And there was representatives from my workplace attending as well to pay the respects. It really hit the neighborhood hard, for sure.
I bet. And what about like damage to the street? Like when you walk by this area now, a little over a year later, do you still see any sign of this having happened?
No, they would have cleaned it up by now, but it's just such a sad story. The emotional scars will always be there, to be honest with you.
And it seems like the city may be more cautious than it had been. Like just when we were in Toronto doing the live show a couple months back, one thing I did notice in Toronto was near some major areas, like outside like a big subway station that I was at, they had these kind of like cement barriers that were dividing the sidewalk from the street. I just and I noticed it, and I remember thinking like, I wonder if this has anything to do with what happened in April of 18.
Oh, definitely. They'll put up big concrete barriers, or they'll even put like cement trucks or dump trucks like in front of like a group of people, to stop van attacks and from happening. Actually, down Maple Leaf Square, where they play the Raptors games and the Leafs games there on the big screen. They'll usually take precautions like that to make sure.
Wow. And I don't know if that's like Halifax isn't as big of a city. I've never seen anything like that here. Maybe other large cities have it, but it stood out to me when I was in Toronto. But regardless, it's like something like this, it will never be forgotten, and it'll always, affect Toronto's, life in Toronto. But there's still like, this is still an unfolding story. Like, this all happened April of 2018, so just about a year ago, just over a year ago. And when we did the first episode, that was like, I think we recorded that like 3 days after, if even 3 days after it all happened. And at that time, Alek Minassian's name came out, but everything was just speculation, like as far as his motivation and whatnot. But the big thing that happened this past week is the video and audio of the interrogation or interview or whatever you want to call it that Alek Minassian gave to the police officers just, I think it was about 3 hours after he was arrested. That audio has now been released, so we get a very good indication of exactly what he was thinking and what his motivation was. And it's pretty dark. Like, when this all came out, like when the interrogation and whatnot was released, like this must have been big in Toronto. Like, people were finally getting to, see kind of the monster that attacked them, basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, at work we were all talking about it, and it's a big deal for sure.
Yeah. So we'll get into it now. So what I've done is I've separated, like, the actual interrogation that includes the confession is just about 4 hours long. I'm not going to play the whole thing. I think I have about 15 minutes of it divided up over several sections that we can listen to and kind of chat it out as it goes. But before we get into the first piece, just to put it in context. So basically, Alek Minassian released the message on Facebook that basically said, "Private Recruit Minassian, Infantry, 00010, wishing to speak with Sergeant 4chan. The incel rebellion has already begun. Will overthrow the Chads and Stacys. All hail the Supreme Gentleman, Elliot Roger." So that was the Facebook message he left. Shortly after, 10 people are killed, 16 injured, after he takes his rented Ryder Cube van off the road onto the sidewalk and intentionally does this. After being arrested, shortly after this all begins, he begins the interrogation with the officer. So we'll get into the first piece of the interrogation and the interview now. What we're going to hear first is the detective basically introduce himself and begin building rapport.
Alek?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Good. Did you drink water?
Sure.
Thanks very much. Thanks so much. How you feeling?
I'm good.
You feeling okay? My name's Rob Thomas.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, how are you? You doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably had better days than this, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I am a little shaken, to be honest.
A little shaken?
It's not my usual day, obviously.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. Yeah. Mind if I call you Alek?
Yeah, sure.
What do your friends normally call you?
Alek.
Alek, I want you to understand something. I'm a senior detective with the Toronto Police. I don't wear a uniform. I wear a suit and tie because of the type of work that I do. But although I'm in a suit and tie, I'm an actual police officer, okay? I got called in for this specific case because of what's happened and the involvement and everything else that's been going on, okay? Before we get started, I want you to know that we're being videotaped and audio taped, okay?
Okay.
Do you know what I mean by that?
Yes, everything I see and do is being captured.
Exactly, yeah, on audio and video, okay? Now, here's what I want to do, Alek. I want to talk to you, okay? We're going to spend a good deal of time together, okay? It's important that I talk to you, all right?
So what we heard there, it's starting off slow, but really we hear the detective Rob Thomas basically very cautiously, slowly and clearly introduce himself, and he seems to be trying to build some rapport. Yeah, just with I'm guessing you're not having a great day today.
Yeah.
That sort of, he seems really casual, non-threatening. But already you can kind of hear Like, I was kind of surprised that Alek Minassian didn't seem like, he says in there, I'm a little bit shaken, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
He sounded pretty calm, and even his body language in the video, to me, he looked like, he wasn't just arrested for killing 10 people.
Yeah.
So that's basically how it starts. The next piece of the recording is going to be when Detective Thomas gets into probing kind of the incel ideology and really gets Alex talking about, his beliefs and seemingly his motivation.
I've done a little bit of reading, and I know a little bit about involuntary
Celibacy.
Celibacy, right? So being celibate, involuntarily celibate. What does that mean?
That means celibacy means someone who never has sexual intercourse.
Right.
Involuntary celibacy means this wasn't your choice. You essentially have been thrown into true forced loneliness, and you're unable to lose your virginity.
Right.
This is especially painful for young males.
You mentioned this, and I forgot. When did you first go on to 4chan?
2014.
2014, and specifically when in 2014?
May 23, 2014.
And how were you able to remember that?
Because I remember that was a very significant day.
Okay, what was that?
That was when Elliot Rodger decided to essentially commit an uprising against the Chads and the Stacys.
It was Elliot Rodger who was the father.
Basically, the founding forefather of the entire movement.
Right. So explain to me this movement. What's this movement about?
It's basically a movement of angry incels, such as myself, who are unable to get laid. Therefore, we want to overthrow the Chads, which would force the Stacys to reproduce with the incels.
Right. Okay. When you say incels,
involuntary celibate.
Celibate. So that's just a short form for fellas who
can't get laid.
Can't have sex. Right. Okay. And what happened in the Elliot Rodgers uprising? What did he do?
I know he used a gun as well as a vehicle to convert the life status of certain individuals to death status.
Right.
Only to carry the message that incels can't be oppressed.
And then what about Chris Harper Mercer? What did he do?
He used a gun for all of his murders.
And were these fellas active on 4chan?
Yes.
They were. Have you ever communicated with these fellas?
I actually have, as a matter of fact.
Who did you communicate with?
Both of them, actually.
Really?
We discussed our frustrations at society and being unable to get laid, and we were plotting a certain timed strikes on society in order to confuse and shake the foundations, just to put all the normies in a state of panic.
Okay, and who would be a normie?
Normie means normal people. That would be anyone who is considered to be normal by the unfair standards of society.
But not the Chads or Stacys.
Chads and Stacys are actually above normies, or at least they think they're above normies.
Of course, yeah. Okay, all right. So is it fair to say you've got Chads and Stacys up here, normies down here, and then you've got incels who believe they're being suppressed or repressed, and so as a result, to even the playing field.
Yes.
They convert the Stacys and Chads from living to dead, and to make
so that we come out on top.
Yeah, it's more than so. Is there so the targets? Who would the targets for this uprising be?
All of the alpha males.
All the alpha males. So the Chads.
Yes.
So those are the people that you want to kill.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And who else?
Any of the Stacys who do not wish to give their love and affection to the incels.
Okay. And what about the normies?
We don't necessarily wish to kill the normies, but we do wish to subjugate them in order to make them understand that that our type is the more superior one.
Right. So when you say subjugate, what do you mean by that?
meaning either imprison them or put them in a lower position in society.
Okay.
So that they acknowledge the incels as the more superior ones.
So, listening to that, Scott, it makes it pretty clear that he at least was identifying as a member of the incel movement. And I say that because when we record it shortly after this attack occurred, that was still kind of speculation at that point. But hearing him use the language of Chads and Stacys and Normies, and, there's Alek Minassian is way into the incel movement or ideology or whatever you want to call it. What did you think hearing this guy talk like that?
It's just like we speculated last year, right? He's just, he's mentally ill, and he really believes in this movement. You can tell just by the way he's saying it without any conviction, right? It's
so matter of fact, the way he's describing it.
It's
like when I hear him talk like that, I feel like this is a person who is like completely obsessed with it. Like I feel like it's all he thought about, and I could see him just spending all his time just sitting on the message board with just this toxic, misogynistic nonsense just being, pumped into his brain, and even like you'll notice it as it goes, but some of the language he uses is really strange. Like he said in that clip, converting the life status to death status.
Oh my gosh.
In describing Elliot Rogers' attack. And I just when I first heard it, I'm like, what a bizarre way to say kill somebody.
Yeah.
But as it goes, he uses that weird sort of language often, and I don't really get it, but I kind of get the idea of what the incels believe. Like, I understand kind of the ideology or whatever you want to call it. It's almost too bizarre to be true. It's so strange that there are people who feel this way to the point that they're radicalized to commit violence.
Yeah,
but
I wonder I wonder if those are like incel terms, like life status, death status. Like, I wonder if that...
Yeah, it's like, although there's not really a religious thing to it, it almost sounds like you're listening to like a cult member talk about their cult or something.
Yes,
but I guess like maybe it's not religious, but it certainly comes down to kind of like belief in a worldview. So it is like, in a way, has some cultish kind of elements to it. But we'll get deeper into it now. So we've heard the introduction. We heard him get into the kind of the background on the incels. But like we heard in that clip there, Alek Minassian mentioned that he said, as a matter of fact, I knew Elliot Rogers as well as another person who was involved in an incel-motivated murder. The cops sounded surprised by that, but Alek Minassian was like, no, as a matter of fact, I talked to them, and the detective Thomas is going to start probing that now. And just before, like, spoiler alert, when we get into it, I doubt a lot of this is true. Like, I can't imagine that he had connections with them, but we'll hear him talk about it. So let's get to that now.
So going back to the conversation with Chris and Elliot, who did you have conversation with first? Let me ask you that.
Elliot.
So how did you learn of Elliot?
Because we private messaged each other on Reddit.
Yep.
After I saw one of his posts, and we just talked about each other and got to know each other, and we found each other very interesting. We both had the same frustrations at society,
right,
despite being separated by distance so far apart.
Right. Did you ever visit him?
No, but I wish I could have.
Yeah. Did he ever come and visit you?
No, but I wish he did.
Yeah. When specifically did you first contact or have contact with Elliot?
January of 2014.
2014. And When did you stop having communication with him?
As soon as he was deceased.
Okay. So his act, I know, took place in 2014, but I wasn't aware of the exact day. What day was it?
May 23, 2014.
May 23rd. Yeah, you said that. So when did you last speak to him?
May 20.
May 20th. And so what did he tell you?
He told me that he has to go. He is on a very important mission, and he might not make it back alive.
And so what did you say to him?
I kind of had an idea in my head of what he was planning, but I didn't want to think it was true at the time, so I said, I wish you good luck with that.
Right on. Okay. And when did you learn that what he had done?
I saw it on the news later that night.
Later on the 23rd?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you think?
I thought that I came to the understanding that this is the mission that he had to carry out.
Okay. All right. And anything else?
I felt kind of proud of him for his acts of bravery.
Okay. All right. And what about how you started to change your thinking? Was any of that going on?
I was starting to feel radicalized at that time.
You were. Okay.
I felt it was time to take action and not just sit on the sidelines and to just fester in my own sadness.
Right on. Okay. All right. So what takes place next? As part of this growing radicalization?
To be honest, the planning didn't occur until about a month ago. Most of it was actually just thinking and daydreaming.
Okay, all right. So the thinking and daydreaming, when did that start?
That started about a month after the rebellion in May of 2014.
Okay, so
in June I started thinking about this stuff.
And then that continued right up till about a month ago?
Yes, which is when I booked the van with the rider in order to use as a tool for rebellion.
Okay, all right. So take me through that process. What was going through your mind, and what were you thinking when you were doing all of this? What was going on?
I was thinking that it was a time that I stood up to the Chads and Stacys.
Okay.
So with that, we hear Alek Minassian's version of his history with Elliot Rodger in the incels. I don't know why. I just have my doubts that that's true. Like, Elliot Rodger's crime was committed over 4 years before Alek Minassian, and that seems like a long time to brood. But it also seems, I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on why I doubt this is correct. I'm sure it'll, like, in his trial or whatnot, I'm sure it's going to come out whether or not this is real.
Yeah, it seems like he might have done it much sooner, if that were true. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. And again, to get back to one other thing we said, we talked about some of the language. He said some other strange things here. One of the things he said is he booked the van. Elliot Rodger did what he did. He waited 4 years. Then he booked the van with a plan to use it as a tool for rebellion. And again, that's really strange language to use for, I booked the van to kill people with. But this whole thing is just strange. So the next part of the interview we're going to jump into is Alek Minassian walking Detective Thomas from picking up the van up until his arrest. So we basically will hear him describe the attack in this part. And this is one of the stranger, 3 or 4 minutes of audio I think I've ever heard.
Tell me what takes place.
So I booked the van.
Yep.
And then I just simply wait until today.
Yep.
And then I go rent the van, and then I drive it, take it downtown to Toronto.
Okay.
And I just start using it as a weapon.
And so when you say that, what do you mean by that?
Meaning the vehicle collided with several pedestrians, some of who are no longer alive as a result.
Okay, and so that's a lot of information. Take me back to a month ago. You said this is when this whole planning started?
Yes.
Okay, so about a month ago, where were you at that point?
I was at Seneca College, and I decided to phone Ryder and book either a truck or a van with them. And they had a 10-foot van available, so I figured that this is perfect. I can it's big enough to have an effect, but not too big that I can't maneuver with it. So van was the perfect medium size to use as my weapon.
Okay, so when do you leave Ryder?
I wasn't looking at the time when I left, but I know I received the van before 1 p.m., although the booking was actually scheduled for 1.
Okay, all right. And how long does it take you to get from Ryder to Younge Street?
To Younge?
The beginning of the attack.
Oh, to the near Younge and Finch.
Yeah.
I would estimate about 20 to 30 minutes.
20 to 30 minutes. Now, what are you thinking while you're in the van?
I'm thinking that this is it. This is the day of retribution.
Okay. And anything else in your mind?
Just that. That's the only thing that's in my mind. It's just burning in my mind.
Burning in your mind.
Yeah.
Okay. And so let me ask you this, because this is really interesting. Why do you choose Younge and Finch?
I didn't choose Younge and Finch in particular. I was driving down Younge because I knew it would be a busy area, and then as soon as I saw there were pedestrians, I just decided to go for it.
Okay. And so, where specifically were you, in terms of your specific location? Where were you when you just decided to go for it?
I was at some traffic lights.
Are you faced with a red light? You're stopped?
Yes, but as soon as it turned green, I started going.
Okay, and just walk me through this, okay, step by step. So it turns green, and what are you thinking?
I'm thinking that this is it. I see all these people. It's time to go for it.
Time to go for it. And what do?
I floor the pedal.
Yep.
I speed the van towards them, and I allow the van to collide with them.
Okay. And then what happens?
Some people get knocked out of the way. Some people roll over the top of the van.
Okay. And then what happens?
I continue doing that until, in fact, actually, to be honest, the only reason I stopped my attack was because someone's drink got splashed on my windshield, and I was worried that I would crash the van anyway, so I decided, okay, now I wanted to do more, but I've kind of been foiled by a lack of visibility. So then that's when I turned right, and I saw the cops approaching, so I decided to pull over and get out of my van.
Okay. Why do you turn right?
Because there wasn't any convenient place to stop at Younge, and like I said, that there was a lack of visibility on my windshield. I could hear the cops coming anyway, so when I turned right, there was a convenient place to pull over on the sidewalk.
Okay. So you end the assault?
Yes.
Okay. And you end it because you can't see?
Yes.
And you knew the cops were coming?
Yes.
Okay. And so then what happens at that point?
I see a patrol car pull over, and I hear the cops screaming at me to get out. So I get out, and I point my wallet at the cop with the intent for it to be confused with a gun so that I could be fatally shot.
Okay. And was that something you were thinking about?
Yes.
I know. I mean, what I'm saying is,
even beforehand, I premeditated as an attempted suicide by cop.
You wanted to be killed by the police.
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask why you decided to equip yourself with a wallet, and not something else?
I was worried. I was thinking about purchasing a toy gun,
right,
but I was kind of paranoid that the rental company would ask to see my pockets or any bag if I chose to bring that, so I decided to go as stealthy as possible so no one suspects anything.
Okay, all right. Nevertheless, you get out of the van, the officer, correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to make sure I get this right. you get out of the van because the officer orders you out?
Yes.
Okay. And you want to die by suicide by police. So you point your wallet at him?
Yes.
Okay. And do you say anything to the officer?
I actually told him that I had a gun in my pocket, which was untrue.
Right.
Then twice I stuck my left hand in my pocket and attempted to do this just to provoke a reaction.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he didn't react,
Right.
so then I ended up being ordered to the ground. So I knew at that point he's not going to shoot me, so I've lost. So I had no choice but to just get on the ground.
So that's a pretty chilling account of what happened. A pretty chilling and matter-of-fact account of what happened. Mm-hmm. What do you think, hearing that, seeing as you basically, lived through this happening, right outside your door for the most part?
It's just really crazy. Well, like I said on the last episode that we talked about this, I feel like I could have been one of his victims, to be honest, because I walk across that street every day.
It's like, it doesn't even seem real, and it doesn't seem like something that would happen, in Toronto. It's just, I don't know, Toronto's a big city, and I guess there are, bizarre people all over the place, so I guess it's destined to happen everywhere. Things like that are destined to happen everywhere, but it's so cold, and he's so detached from it. Again, with the language that he's used, he said, one of the things he said was I allowed the van to collide with people, which is just weird to say I allowed the van to do it, because it's he didn't allow the van to do it. He did it. And he also, he also described it as the vehicle collided with several pedestrians, some of who are no longer alive as a result. It just seems like that language is keeping him a step away from being responsible. It's almost like he's blaming the van. It's really weird. And then for it all to end with he got water or someone's drink splashed on his window.
Yeah.
And that was what stopped him.
Yeah, it foiled him, is what he said.
Yeah, it foiled by that. Foiled with visibility. And he talked about in a prior clip, he talked about Elliot Rogers being brave. Elliot Rogers basically drove around in a sports car shooting his gun out of the window. He had this high-end sports car. That is the least brave thing I think you could do. But maybe it's tied with the other least brave thing, which is rent a huge cube van and drive that down the sidewalk, hitting people who have no idea what's coming. And then to show how, just the state of this guy, somebody's drink got on his window. And that's when he decided to give up after killing 10 people. It's absurd to hear him say that. And, and then that whole scene plays out with, we talked about this a lot in the first episode, but basically he got out of the van trying to get the cop to kill him by, acting like he had a gun in his pocket. But the cop was having none of it. The cop was just get on the ground. But that's still that clip of the cop not being fazed by this guy pretending to pull out a gun over and over again. It's just such a classic case of just composure and guts and the type of bravery that Alek Minassian saw in Elliot Rogers' act. It's that the cop, that was the one act of bravery, I think, in this whole mess. Yeah. So the last, before we get into the last piece, anything else you want to say about him describing his attack?
It's chilling, to be honest. He really shows no signs of remorse, and
no.
I worry that he'll get NCR and he'll be out walking around.
Yeah,
in no time.
We'll get into.
We'll talk.
Yeah, we'll get into that because that's definitely something that's going to come up, I'm sure, in his trial. It'll have to, but the last thing here is basically a short clip of the Detective Thomas, I'm not sure. There must be some reason for this, but he was really trying to get Alek Minassian to talk about how he felt about what he did. I included just a small part of this just because it's like, again, it's chilling and it gives a kind of a look into like this, a psychological look at what's happening. So we'll get that last clip and then we'll talk about what will come next.
I'm going to ask you this because it's important. 10 people died here today. 15 people were seriously injured. I think it's important to ask how you feel about that.
I feel like I accomplished my mission.
You feel like you accomplished your mission?
Yes.
Okay. If the families of those people who were murdered and who were injured were in this room right now, what would you say to them?
I honestly don't know what I would say.
Would you apologize?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah. Detective Thomas really got right to it there. Like, what would you say to them? He had no response for that.
Yeah.
And that was right after saying, like, I feel like I've accomplished my mission. Not to, like, argue the logic of what he did, but when you think of kind of the way he described the ideology of the incel, I don't see what this kind of a crime or what this attack, like how that would further the position of an incel. I don't get that one part of it, but I guess maybe it's illogical.
Well, he's a terrorist, right? That's the thing, and they just want to bring attention to their twisted cause, right? So
yeah, and it's like, and there's no question he believes it. Like when you hear him talk about this, but
yeah,
it's bizarre, and it's still playing. Like the next stage of this is, at this point, it's looking like February that he's going to be going to trial again for 10 murders, and the 16, I'm sure. Well, I don't even know how many attempted murders. 16 were injured, but a lot of people weren't injured because they jumped out of the way of him or whatnot. So there's going to be a lot of charges putting against him. He's pled not guilty. Yet this audio clip this audio that we're listening to, hours of this, is out there. So, like, you had mentioned NCR, which is in Canada. That's when you plead not guilty due to the not criminally responsible for the crime. Yeah. There's a legal definition for it. So it's basically that the crime was committed while one was suffering from a mental disorder that rendered the person incapable of appreciating the nature and quality of the act or omission, or of knowing that it was wrong. In this case, I think he's going to have an uphill battle if he plans to use not criminally responsible as a defense, because for one, yeah, he's proud of doing it. Secondly, he admits that he knew it was wrong, like he was trying to kind of conceal what he was doing, and he was deciding to do it, and he had a reason he was doing it, which was to further the incel cause or whatnot. Like, it wasn't like, let's say on my podcast I covered Rohini Bisasar, the path stabber in Toronto, yeah, who she successfully used the NCR defense in her case for a murder. She was charged with murder, but her case had it was all about her hearing voices, and it was this completely random thing that made no sense whatsoever. Yeah. Alek Minassian, although the whole thing is bizarre, like, he decided to do this and set out and did it and was proud of having done it. And he sounds, although detached and weird in his language, he sounds coherent and organized in thought to me.
Yeah. Yeah, he was able to go rent a vehicle. And
yeah, and it just like in hearing him describe it, like just comparing with Rohini Bisasar, she was, while on trial, she was trying to get the girl who was murdered to take the stand, and she was basically arguing why the person that was murdered wouldn't take the stand. Like, it was, madness.
Yeah, exactly.
This guy, Alek Minassian, he seems really organized and coherent and calm in his telling. Like, he doesn't sound like someone who's in the midst of a mental nervous breakdown. Although, again, I'm not an expert, so I don't know what that would sound like, but that's not how it strikes me. But again, some things to this point is the language he was using is so, making it sound so detached, and maybe, I don't know, maybe he feels that way. And then also, like, one thing that I thought was really weird, he was talking about, like, they asked why he used his wallet rather than like a toy gun. And he was worried that people at the rider rental place like, I've rented a lot of cars, and I never once thought, it would ever be appropriate for them to look at my pockets.
Yeah.
So
it's a weird concern.
I don't know. Yeah, and when I heard that, I was like, ooh, like something is, seriously wrong with this guy. But like, what's going to be interesting is when this does go to trial again, hopefully in February, if reports from, like mental health professionals are put into evidence, like to see what diagnosis they have for him and any explanation as far as why he would do this, aside from, what he just said in that confession. Like, I think that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah. We all get frustrated, Jordan, with our lives, right? And, people, whether it's their jobs or their love life or, their sports teams aren't winning, like, you shouldn't go rent a van and kill 10 people.
Yeah, and of course you shouldn't, but on top of that is, like, human life, like, you shouldn't be able to just calmly recount it, because again, like, we're listening to this a little over a year later, but what we're hearing him talk is like, hours after he drove down a busy sidewalk, hitting people and killing them, like, intentionally. Like, you shouldn't be able to just, that shouldn't be okay for any human. Something's seriously wrong if it gets to that point.
Yeah, he's just sitting there talking about it as if someone asked him how his day was. Yeah,
and it reminds me of the series that I did where I interviewed Lindsay Suvanaroth. Like, although she didn't kill anybody, but she had the same kind of cold, matter-of-fact telling of what happened as I'm hearing with this guy. And it's just like, to me, like, the most horrifying thing of all this is that there are people like that. These people are real and they did this. And how many other people are out there that are capable of this kind of nonsensical, violent, horrifying acts that is, completely pointless. And like, to me, that scares the crap out of me.
Yeah, indeed. There's probably quite a few people like that.
All right, so we'll continue this talk, hopefully late February, if this case makes it to court when it's scheduled, and when this all gets wrapped up, we'll do a third part to talk about what comes out in trial, and what comes of Alek Minassian and what kind of justice his victims are going to receive.
Yeah, I'll be following for sure. I'll be following that trial very, very closely.
I want to dedicate this episode to the memories of the victims of this horrific and senseless attack. My hope is that justice will be served, and served up in whatever way the friends and families of the victims see fit. And with that, we'll conclude this episode of Nighttime. But before I wrap things up, I'm going to give some thanks. I want to thank my best friend Scott for again joining me to discuss a crime that quite literally occurred on his doorstep. And next, a big shout out to the Canadian bands Voxomnia and Paragon who provide a lot of the music for Nighttime. You can check out these great bands using the link in the episode notes. And then, of course, the biggest thanks of all goes out to everyone listening. Without you all, I'd have no excuse to spend so much of my time putting the show together. And for anyone out there who wants more Nighttime, please consider supporting my Patreon campaign. For $1 a month, you can access the ad-free premium feed, which provides early releases of the episodes. And then, for a couple bucks more, you can access the Nightcap Aftershow episodes, in which I and a guest climb even further down the rabbit holes than what you'll hear in the main episode. You can join by visiting patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And with that said, I'd like to thank the current patrons of the show and welcome the new members to the group. Gina, Matt McKay, Hazmek, Shannon, and Andre, I appreciate your generous support of Nighttime. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show but can't help financially, you can give a big hand by telling your friends about me and leaving a positive review on Apple Podcasts or whichever equivalent you use. If any of you listening want to stay up to date with my activities on and off the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I use the handle @NighttimePod. If you have any story ideas or want to give feedback on the show, I'd love to hear from you at nighttimepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let me know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte. Copyright Jordan Bonaparte.